All right, I want to talk to you for a minute about string muting, where we are muting out the notes that we don't want to be heard played. Now, throughout this DVD, we're going to be talking about other techniques like bending strings and different types of licks. And when you're bending strings and you're playing other things, you're going to be hitting strings into one another, and your fingers are going to be hitting other strings. And unless you mute out those unwanted notes, you're going to have all kinds of noise when you're playing, and that's unwanted, okay? You want to have your playing totally clean. The basic mantra to live by is basically you want to mute out every note that you are not playing. The only note that you want to be heard is the one you're actually playing. Everything else gets muted out. I'm going to teach you how to do that right now with a muting technique using both hands, where you're going to mute out all those unwanted notes. For all our examples and all our exercises, we're using alternate picking, all down, up, down, up, down, up, down, up. Now, the two things we're going to be doing is we're going to be muting the lower strings with the side of the palm of our fret hand, just by laying the fret hand right on the strings, and then we're going to be muting out the high strings with the tip of our first finger. So at any given time, you are going to have muting going on, except if you want to hear like an open string or something, then you got to let go, like an open E or whatever. But for the most part, you're going to be, your hands are going to be connected to the strings at all times. Now, if you're playing and you're picking and your hand is off of the bridge or off of the strings, and you're picking like that, I strongly suggest you start resting your hand right on the fret, right on the bridge, and find a position that's comfortable for you. But rest your hand right on the strings. You have to. That's an absolute must in order to mute out all these other strings. So first thing, boom, get that hand down right on the strings. Now, I like to leave my hand, as you can see, my hand and arm almost like parallel right on the strings. And that works really well for me. Some people use a little more of a downward angle, and that's fine, you know, but you want to find what's comfortable for you. I like resting my hands right about on the bridge, and this part of my hand is going to be muting out these low strings. So those strings are muted. Now this is very critical. Reason being, like if I'm going to play this A note on the D string at the 7th fret, the only note I want you to hear is that note. If I try to play the A string, it's muted. The low E is muted because my hand is on the strings. But you can hear the note I want you to hear. Now, if I go down, if I leave my hand on that note, but I go to the other strings, the G, the B, and the high E, they're muted also. And the way they're muted is they're muted with the first finger. Okay? And what I do is I take the first finger and I lightly lay it on the strings at all times. So you see that first finger is constantly laying on those high strings, no matter what I'm playing. See? All those notes are muted, all those strings are muted because I don't want you to hear them. Especially once you start adding distortion and gain, it's going to add more noise, so you got to be really good at your muting techniques. And the palm of the hand, or the flat side of the palm, is lying down on these low strings. So I want you to practice this. I want you to practice getting your hands down, both of them on the strings at all times. And if you look at a tight shot, I'm talking about, you know, this part of the underside of my first finger lying right on the strings, almost at a little bit of an angle. So they're always muting. And you could see here, if I turn to the side, you could see how this first finger, even like if I'm playing at the 5th fret on that, let's say the C note on the G string. Now, I'm not going like this and hooking it really hard like I was playing a chord. Because if I was to do that, there's too much space here, and you would hear these notes ringing out. So it's more of a laying it more flat down, no matter where I move it, and laying it right on the strings. So now, see, those other strings are muted, but you could hear the note on the G string that I'm playing, no matter what fret. And there's a nice side angle of that. So that's the position of that first finger, and that is critical. No matter where you're playing, keep that first finger down. And notice that when I play. The other thing you have to do with this technique is, and this is very subtle, it just takes a little bit of time to get used to, is as, let's say you're working down the strings and you're playing, you know, whatever, scales or licks, it's a slight movement of the fret hand down to mute the strings as you go down them, okay? As you go down, you're slightly coming down with the hand and then slightly going up. Now, it might sound like a lot at first. I got to mute the strings, I got to move my first finger, but after a while, these things, if you do them, will become automatic, so you won't even be thinking about them. Same thing like when you're playing like a G chord to a D chord. You're not saying to yourself, okay, move my second finger down to the high E string and move my first finger down to the G string. See, those movements are automatic. It's muscle memory, right? You have them down. Same thing with this technique. A lot of these techniques I'm teaching you, if you keep doing them and practicing them and 10 minutes a day putting that guitar in your hands, after a while these will be automatic. You won't even be thinking about them. That just becomes ingrained in your playing. So like if I was to just play this, I'm just going to play a major scale. You don't have to learn this. I'm just doing this for explanation purposes. Just playing a G major scale. Now if I do this slow, watch my fret hand. As I play the scale, it's going to be slowly moving down the strings to mute every successive string the lower I go. Okay? That's very important, this slight movement, because let's say I'll stop halfway through the scale. Okay, I'm on the G string. So everything lower, the E, low E, A, and D, are muted because I'm moving that down. And everything higher, the B and the high E string, is muted by that first finger laying right on the strings. Notice you don't hear any unwanted string noises or pops or anything. You only hear the note that I want you to hear. Every other note is muted out. So it's a very slight movement up and down the strings, and just keep that first finger laid across. And it might feel a little weird at first, but you can do it with just a little bit of practice. It's absolutely critical that you do this two-handed string muting. If you don't, and you might have experienced this already, when you're slamming into these other strings and you hear all that noise, you're like, geez, that doesn't sound. Why? Because you're hitting these other strings, and especially if you're playing with a lot of gain. So you have to mute out these strings. It's critical. So just practice it when you're doing your finger exercises, when you get to that, when you're doing your picking exercises. A lot of these exercises, there's overlap. I want you to learn the exercise. Then the next exercise, do what I taught you in that exercise plus the new exercise. Then the next exercise, do what I taught you in the first two. Alternate pick it. String mute, then hammer on. Then take that and next. So this is a succession. This is a staircase, and we're building here. So you got to kind of take this in stages. And for your lead playing, these techniques are absolutely essential, and these are often left out of many instructionals. So work this up, practice. Remember, it's not going to sound great right from the start, and you're still going to hear noise a little bit every day, and eventually this will just become ingrained in you, and you could get it. All right? We'll see you in the next lesson.